Okay, I'm going to call to order this regular City Commission meeting of Monday, November 18th. Call it to order. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll also begin with our land acknowledgement that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land through the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. And with that, I will go ahead and go to the city clerk for a roll call.
Yes, good evening. Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Stanley?
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Here.
Commissioner Werner?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Present.
And Mayor Shamrow.
Here. Okay, and we'll go to any announcements from the city manager.
I just wanted to thank the staff and city commissioners who've been participating in the strategic planning process. The next steps will be to develop a community survey. We are committed to communicating all the next steps in the strategic planning process far and wide so that we can have as many people participate. We had an additional 150 residents participate in the visioning sessions, so thank you to those who made time to participate.
And to the city clerk.
Yes, just some meetings to announce for this week, the week of November 18th, 2024. The Planning Commission will meet on Tuesday, November 19th. That'll be at 6 p.m. in the Commission chambers. Arts Commission will meet on Wednesday, November 20th at 3:30 p.m. in the committee room, which is on the second floor of the Governmental Center. The City Commission is having a study session this Wednesday, November 20th at 6 p.m. in the Commission chambers. And finally, with respect to meetings, the Historic Districts Commission will meet on Thursday, November 21st. That's at noon in the committee room on the second floor of the Governmental Center. We've got a number of board and committees for which we're seeking volunteers. Anyone interested in volunteering, we encourage to contact the city clerk's office. And then just some community updates. The city's leaf pickup program is continuing. They're making multiple passes, or I should say this is the second pass that has begun, and the crews are currently in Zone 5, and you can check progress updates, including your zone, and the status of that leaf pickup effort at the city's webpage. And then the city and Tart Trails and the DDA are hosting a ribbon cutting ceremony. That's for the new Bayfront Trail. That's at 4:30 p.m. this Thursday, November 21st, and it'll be at the Clinch Park kiosk. And then just as always, I just remind everyone sitting up here to please speak into your microphone so everyone can hear you. And that's all that I've got.
Great, thank
I have a
you.
question.
Go ahead.
Is this is the last leaf pass, right?
I believe so. Right, Mr. Deturi, this is the last leaf pass, just two?
Oh, okay.
He's saying that they continue to go until the leaves have fallen, but it does depend on when the snow falls, because once the snow's here, it's, we can't really do much about it. All right.
Good question. Okay, and I don't believe anybody is here from Kiwanis Club. Raise your hand if you are. Okay, we had something kind of come up with them, but we are going to take a moment to read the proclamation celebrating 100 years of the Kiwanis Club in Traverse City. I had the privilege of being invited to their celebration a couple of weeks ago and hearing all about the great programs they do, especially focusing on, well, I think many people in the public know them for their flags that they put out at many of our intersections on major holidays. They do a lot of programs focusing on children's literacy and focusing on equal access to outdoor activities such as at Holiday Hills and other places. So I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that and read the proclamation here proclaiming the recognition of 100th anniversary of the Kiwanis Club of Traverse City. Whereas the Kiwanis Club of Traverse City was established November 24th, 1924, committed to serving the needs of children and communities in Traverse City and beyond. And whereas for the past 100 years, the Kiwanis Club of Traverse City has demonstrated unwavering dedication to fostering the development of our community's youth, promoting education and supporting numerous charitable initiatives. And whereas the Kiwanis Club of Traverse City has provided invaluable service through programs and activities that enhance the quality of life for residents, including leadership and youth-oriented projects, scholarships, mentorship programs, and community events. And whereas the members of the Kiwanis Club have exhibited a steadfast commitment to the principles of goodwill, leadership, and volunteerism, contributing thousands of hours to improving our community and embodying the spirit of public service. And whereas the City of Traverse City is proud to recognize and celebrate the remarkable achievements and enduring legacy of the Kiwanis Club of Traverse City as they reach their significant milestone of 100 years of service. And now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Amy Shamrow of the City of Traverse City, do hereby proclaim that November 24, 2024 will be officially recognized as the 100th anniversary of the Kiwanis Club of Traverse City. So congratulations to our Kiwanis Club for that great achievement and all they do in our community. So moving on to that, I will hand it back over to Benjamin for the consent calendar.
Yes, the purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public can ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed from it and placed elsewhere on the agenda for individual consideration by the commission, and such requests are automatically respected. If an item isn't removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single commission action adopting the consent calendar. Item 1, consideration of approving the minutes of the October 21 and November 11, 2024 meetings of the City Commission. Approval recommended. Item 2, consideration of authorizing a confirming purchase order for diesel fuel for city operational use. Approval recommended. Item 3, consideration of authorizing a purchase order for actuarial services for post-employment benefits for a total 3-year purchase order of $26,500 and superseding the purchase order authorized on September 16, 2024, with the additional $6,000 cost due to necessary reports in connection with the city's defined pension benefit. Approval recommended. Item 4, consideration of authorizing a 3-year purchase order for window cleaning at the Larry C. Hardy parking deck and Old Town parking deck. Approval recommended. Item 5, consideration of authorizing a purchase order for 19 sets of turnout gear for use by the fire department to be reimbursed by a State of Michigan Office of Economic Development grant. Approval recommended. Item 6 is a duplicate of item number 5. Item 7, consideration of declaring a pickup truck surplus and consideration of authorizing a purchase order for a 2025 Ford Lightning fully electric pickup truck, which is a scheduled replacement for use by Traverse City Light and Power. Approval recommended. And finally, item 8, consideration of authorizing a $15,000 grant application to the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians for a week-long public art and mural festival led by the Arts Commission. Approval recommended.
Thank you for that. Would any commissioner like an item pulled from the consent calendar? Go ahead, Jackie.
Number 8, please.
Okay. Any others? Seeing none, I'll open it to the public. Would anybody from the public like an item pulled from the consent calendar other than item number 8, because it has already been pulled? Seeing none, I will take a motion for amended consent calendar.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent calendar as amended.
Thank you, Commissioner Stanley.
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Warner. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 8, Jackie, you had some questions?
Yes, thank you. I'm excited about this proposed event, and I'm definitely in favor of the recommendation that we request a 2% grant. I am wondering, I'm seeking some context. I wonder who is the owner of this event? You know, does it have an organizing sponsor? Is there a full project proposal that we'll be able to see as commissioners, and if so, when? And I wondered about the venue for this, if it extends beyond the north of Boardman neighborhood, further into the city.
Does staff, Harry's here, sorry. There you go, Harry, you're in the back, I didn't see you.
Harry Burkholder with the DDA, but liaison for the Arts Commission. Just want to make sure I get all your questions. The Arts Commission is the organizer of this mural festival. So that is the organizing force. We are working with several different partners, but it's the Arts Commission's project. We are working to solidify the number of murals that we're going to do, and that's really based on the availability of a wall space. So we're actively working with private business owners within the corridor to determine if and when we can use their space for murals. And essentially the kind of Nobo district or the A Street corridor was identified by the Arts Commission as kind of a focus for art for the next couple of years. So the mural festival is just one type of activity that we hope to do along that corridor.
Is there an estimate of the overall budget for the event?
Yep, and I think that might have got sent
On Saturday.
on
Oh,
Saturday.
Yes.
I'm
Yep.
Yeah,
sorry.
it
I
wasn't in
missed
the
it.
packet, which is probably why you
Forgive
didn't
me.
see it.
So we're eyeballing about $122,000 for the budget overall. And that includes expenses for artists' fees and travel, the mural space itself, and all the prep and work that goes into the hosting the festival. And we are working on a series of funding sources. Obviously, we're applying for the tribe, but we did receive a Michigan Arts and Culture Council grant about 2 months ago. We have funding committed from the Arts Commission itself for the next year, TART Trails, and then we're still working to kind of get the rest of the funding for this project. The target is for the fall of next year, 25. Yeah,
Oh, fall, not April.
fall.
Fall. Thank you. Last question then, are the hosting venues for the murals all going to be within the DDA district?
No,
or-
so the Arts Commission is a citywide organization, so we just happen to be staff, so these are not falling within the TIF district.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions or a motion?
I move
Thank you.
that the City Commission adopt a resolution in support of the Traverse City Arts Commission 2% grant application to the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians requesting $15,000.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioners Anderson and Shaw. Any further discussion from the commission on this item? Seeing none, any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. So we'll move on now to, there is no old business, so we'll move on to new business. And this is in dealing with our information and technology services.
Thank you, Mayor Shamro. This evening, I'd like to introduce Jerry Swanson, our GIS and IT Director, who's going to give some history on where we stand with shared county and city infrastructure. And then following his presentation, I will introduce Ken Andrews, the President and Founder of Millennium Digital Technologies, who's going to walk us through a proposal for separation of services.
Sorry. Good evening, Jerry Swanson, City GIS and IT Administrator. So, obviously, I've got a lot of thoughts on the city's evolution of their IT, and one of the things that puts a really context for everyone and everything before you is, I actually got this tidbit from Bill Tweetmeyer, our retired treasurer, and he said back in the early 90s, he didn't recall if it was the chamber, but some group essentially recommended to the county and the city to invest in a new technology, as in a AS400, which is kind of like a mainframe computer. And that was really to get the city and the county as using a shared resource for financial software, but also really just kind of putting the county and the city in a digital age. So that decision was made in the early 90s to kind of do a shared cost, as well as bringing in Light and Power for utility billing. And so that relationship really lasted for about 30 years. And it worked really great. There was a lot of sharing of staff and resources to kind of manage this big system. So really in the last 5 years, there's been kind of a divergence. As we know, technology touches us all more and more every day, and so over the last 5 years, we've seen the city kind of picking a different enterprise system called BSNA, so that's what drives all of our financial, payroll, more recently utility billing. So that's kind of where we're putting a lot of our eggs in that system. Recently, the county had also moved to a different system called Workday, so that's a totally different ERP system. And so again, that's where we're not really sharing that common resource. Another example would be like our Google, and we use Google at the city for our email, and the county recently moved to Microsoft. So again, there's just kind of been this divergence, and really it's because we're picking what's best for our organization for these systems. And lastly, really with the Traverse City Light and Power, you saw, I think 2 years ago, they started to move to a different billing system. And again, they have a technical utility rate they're trying to apply, as well as with the fiber to the premise, so that, again, they were picking a system that fit their needs. So really, as we move forward, it became more and more clear that the city kind of needed to take some of that control and really kind of have more of investment in our own systems versus kind of this shared environment. And again, it worked really well for a long time. It's just now here we are in 2025 almost, and as we know, technology changes fast. Obviously, there was a cyber incident this summer that also kind of brought some things to light about the interconnectivity between the two entities, so that's another factor with some of the items we're bringing tonight. Another thing I just wanted to share that's been kind of exciting on this whole frontier we're kind of entering is just kind of a success story of where like the city kind of taking the reins on some technology. And I want to just kind of go over this one real quick with, as we all know, Hickory Hills is a really big investment the community made back in 2018, brand new, really nice lodge. One thing that really struck with me is when, as that site becomes more mature, there really was no technology in place there. No internet really, the internet was really unreliable, and we didn't even really have cabling for computer systems or anything. So I think in hindsight, we just didn't have anyone at the table during that discussion to make sure we had technology in place at this really, big investment we were making. So within the last year, I've been working with city staff to kind of re-envision Hickory Hills. So we installed a Starlink satellite internet, so now we get really fast, high speed there. The Parks Department also brought in a point-of-sale system to manage all of the Hickory, rentals, ski passes, food service, event rental, kind of that software that manages like a ski kind of resort or ski lodge. So we ended up getting network cabling in place. We worked with Millennium Digital Technologies as kind of like a pilot project to bring them in. And now you'll see this winter, you'll be pretty surprised to go in there and you'll see kind of a modern system in place. We'll have a public Wi-Fi available for the citizenry. We have a secured Wi-Fi for the point of sale system, and then we have an internal network for just the employees. So we've kind of built this nice modern system out there. And that was just a good example of us kind of taking the lead instead of being more reactive to a situation when it comes to technology. So again, that was just kind of a success story of city staff working together, but then also bringing in a vendor to help with some of the more technical parts of the project. So I just kind of want to share those tidbits. Happy to answer any other questions you guys might have. I really think about this stuff a lot. I'm pretty excited. And, I think we just kind of are on the verge of that next frontier for the city in terms of how we can leverage our technology. So.
And because we have so many visitors today, and though there are agendas outside, if people didn't grab them, this is a larger conversation. We've got about 4 items of related but separate to address. So commissioners, I invite you to ask general questions right now if you have any. If we want to move on to the first agenda or the first proposed motion, we can do that as well. I'll let you all kind of see how you want to handle the conversation with our resource of Jerry here available for us. Go ahead.
Just a suggestion that for the benefit of folks who may be in the audience or viewing at home, we spend a rather significant amount of money with Grand Traverse County for their IT services, correct? Can you give us a ballpark estimate on that number?
Yeah, so we have a current contract in place, which is in the packet, and that's from a 2007 agreement that was signed between both city and county. And actually, the rates listed in there have changed over time. There's obviously the ability for the county to adjust those rates as needed. So, yeah, right now, we actually just went through kind of an upping in the price in the last budget year. So, yeah, right now we're paying roughly $360,000 per year for those services from the county. And those are really based off a flat fee per computer. So it was a little bit restructured recently. There used to be a little more complexity in their billing, but really it's just a flat rate per city computer that we have on the network.
And that doesn't include hardware or software, that's services or?
Yeah, ultimately that allows us to put tickets into the system. We can leverage their staff for projects if we want to, but we are mostly, we pay our own software licensing for the most part. There was still some shared resources there that we've more recently kind of started to separate out. But yeah, we purchased the computers. So through the city's capital fund, we purchased computer laptops, desktops, but then we hand those over to the county to configure them to be used on the network here.
And their services are available to us basically during business hours, yes? 5 days a week?
Yeah, so most staff obviously are 8 to 5, and so they're able to put a ticket into a IT ticket system and get response during those business time. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have other questions? Or do we want to tackle the first motion, which is the notice of intent to terminate in the future? Oh, go ahead, Bonnie.
I'd like to make that motion. I do have a slight modification to
Please.
it. Shall I read that in whole?
Please.
Okay. I'd like to make the recommendation that the city manager be authorized to provide, at a time determined by the city manager, a notice of termination to the Grand Traverse County clerk of the interlocal agreement for information technology and telecommunications system, and that staff will negotiate an agreement with Grand Traverse County for telecommunications services to be considered by the City Commission at a future date, and further, that the attorney-client privilege letter from McDonald Hopkins regarding this matter be released.
Support.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Stanley and Commissioner Warner. Just to clarify, because we are getting, I think we've even had questions about this in the past ourselves, that this is an intent to, in the future, notify the county within our, I believe it's a 90-day required termination. And I want to stress that this is really laying a very slow groundwork for us to remove, that we are not trying to pull out of the whole agreement right now, last minute, with no conversations happening. As I think Jerry has laid out really well for us, that this has been a partnership for 3 decades now, but our needs are just kind of diverging at this point, as well as some other factors that are going on. So I just really wanted to make that clear, that this is not an intention of termination today.
Yes, so I did send a memo to the county administrator, Nate Alger, on October 8th, sort of letting him know that this meeting was coming. We had we had actually a very productive and efficient meeting today with the county, and I said that the 90-day notice will come at a time that's agreeable to both parties, when we've agreed that we're at the right spot for both the county and the city to move forward. And that will also need to include a new updated agreement, because we will still have telecom services provided by the county, and we still have the law enforcement center. And so we need to work through that as well on a parallel track. But I did assure the deputy, Chris Forsyth, who's the point of contact for the administration, who was also at that meeting, and Mr. Dupuy, the IT director for the county, that we want to make sure that both parties have enough time to get through these different steps and phases before we go to the next. And so they will not be getting a surprise notice that the 90 days is headed at them, that there will be plenty of time for us to work on that together. And I was very pleased by today's sort of starter conversation, and looking forward to that continued relationship.
Do we have any other questions or comments from commissioners regarding this motion? Seeing none, I will open it up for public comment. So any public comment on this motion? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Go ahead.
Would you like the presentation that we have prepared for you, or are we satisfied? If you're satisfied, that's...
I think we're good. I mean, we'd hate to, if somebody has one they really want to give, but maybe letting us know what's going on.
We can do that at a future update.
Great. Okay, so we now have we're now moving into the for now agreement to move into providing this is the hardware associated with moving forward. As was mentioned by the presentation, these will be going on in kind of 2 tiers. So we'll welcome Jerry back for that.
Yeah, so obviously there's 4 tiers to this new business item. So yeah, this one is laying out the kind of the upfront cost that's going to occur for us to kind of get all of the hardware and software licensing to get us up to pretty much status quo. But also it's giving us a lot of scalability. So, you know, we kind of have a fresh slate in the sense, because not many opportunities you get to just kind of spin up something like this from the ground up. And then obviously as part of that, so the city's actually, you know, we're going to own this hardware and software licensing, and then there's obviously some component of the services from Millennium Digital to help us set all that up. And Ken is here too for any questions and if needed.
All right, well, why don't we get that presentation out since we
There we go.
put that together, right? All right, great. So we put together a little presentation just to give you some background. And before we get into that, I should just mention that this has been really like a 5.5-month process that we've been, you know, that we've undertaken. And that process started in an extremely serious situation for the city. The city's IT was on fire, so to speak. The city couldn't pay its bills. The city did not have a clear path to how your systems would be restored and how things would start working normally again. City staff were running around with their hair on fire, with notepads, and just trying to get city business, you know, done. So
Really
was a-
quickly, because we have a fresh audience here, this is all in regards to the
cyber incident.
cyber incident. This is not, we normally can pay our bills and we normally are not running around with our hair
Sorry,
on fire.
yeah.
This is in relation to the cyber incident over the summer, but continue, sorry, I just
The
wanted to
money
make sure
is
that
in the
didn't get out
bank,
of
but the
context.
checks cannot be cut, right? So, in my role in our company, Millennium Digital Technologies, we're a Michigan-based company, founded here in Michigan. I'm a grown and raised Michigander. This is what we do. We do this around the world. We have customers from Amsterdam to Guam. We like to mention that we're the only managed network provider in the state of Michigan, certified as a level 1 managed service provider by Visa. So that's a big deal, and we're really proud of that, and we're really proud of bringing that expertise here to Michigan. And the other thing that I would say too is the way that we go about things is maybe a little bit old-fashioned. It's all about partnership. It's all about working together. It's all about building relationships. That's why we've been successful. We don't go out. We don't advertise. We frankly don't ask for business. The business comes to us because of the referrals and the relationships that we've built. So I like to think that that's a great way of doing business. That's just the way that we do it. So let's just talk a little bit here about the inception of the project. So this all started with the 2024 cyber incident. As mentioned, when we came in, the situation was somewhat dire. And the city needed some trusted expertise and guidance to work through that and figure out what are the next steps, what should we be doing, what are our potential risks, you know, what does the future look like, all of those kind of things. So we collaborated with the city as well as the other experts that were brought in, both from the insurance company, legal, just to try to work through that process. In doing that, we took some initial steps to enhance the security and then also ensure service continuity. One of the problems that I mentioned earlier was that city staff had a hard time you know, just conducting business because of the issues they had with technology. So we were able to help them stopgap some of those issues, you know, make things run smoother, just help the city get somewhat back to normal. And then the follow-on to that was collaborating on the strategic plan for how we move forward, right? One of the things about cyber attacks that really stink is kind of once you're on the radar, you're like always on the radar. This data is out there, your information is out there, it's a challenge. So you need to shore up your resources before the next attack comes, because you know it is coming. So you know our goal here was, okay, what can we do to strengthen the technology, prevent future attacks, and then also as part of that, migrate to a platform if necessary, you know, that supports the city long term. And one of the things that was universally recommended by everybody, your council, us, even the county's insurance, the city's insurance, everybody recommended that the city really needs to be in control of your own destiny here. Your systems need to be housed, you know, within something that you have control over. And that just frankly wasn't the case. So that brings us to the need to transition. So the recommendation was, and we've been working on the plan for the last approximately 5 months, is a plan to transition all of the city IT services, you know, from the county to the city. So now when we do that, an obvious advantage of that is that we're a lot more nimble. We can get things done much quicker. When Jerry needs, you know, a new computer on the network. It's not like it's going to be a months-long process. I mean, we can literally get that done tomorrow or today even. When law enforcement needs help, that's another area that we found out. When law enforcement, when officers, public safety officers have a problem in the field, they need access to 24/7 support. They can't be waiting until Monday or the next business day to get support. So, we found that there's a lot of issues here, and a lot of them just go back to the city not having control over your own systems, your own resources. So we gain a lot of agility to address city priorities. Another big part of this transition plan was how do we consolidate and collaborate with city partners? And a good case in point with that was Traverse City Light and Power, who's been a fantastic partner in this. We've been working with them right from the beginning, through the entire process. One area that they've helped out tremendously is with their dark fiber network. So we're able to leverage the dark fiber network and light up a wide area network for the city. And we took a look at the cost to do that. And if we went outside of TCLP to do it, it would be probably a 10x cost over what TCLP can do it for. So again, that's just a fantastic example where you can really collaborate within the city to get things done efficiently and leverage investments in infrastructure that you guys already have. Another thing that we looked at is how do we optimize the infrastructure and keep the costs down, right? So this is all about right sizing. So we want to have the right amount of technology for what needs to happen. And we want to use the right type of technology as well. So for example, while we do recommend a lot of things that are like mission critical to the city be kept in-house, there's absolutely a use case for putting certain things on the cloud where it makes sense. So the approach that we've taken is a hybrid approach. So you've got some things located within the city infrastructure, and then we have some things located within the cloud strategically when it makes sense. There are some things that we would recommend you never put in the cloud for various reasons, whether it be security or data resiliency, availability, things like that. So that's the need. Let's talk a little bit about the transition or the technology platform. Now, we don't want to get too deep into the weeds. I'm trying to keep it simple, and I hate buzzwords and all that kind of stuff, but there is a little bit in here that I would just like to bring up because I think it's important that you know this. So the first thing is the concept that we're looking at going to is very similar to the concept that the county uses today, all right? And so what this is a virtualized environment. And the way that I can boil that down is computers have gotten so powerful in the last, say, decade that a single server now is the equivalent power, in some cases, of hundreds of smaller servers that you buy back in the past. So rather than having a rack full of 100 servers now, we can literally take all of that computing power and stuff it in one piece of equipment, and it's the equivalent. So virtualization is a really cool thing because it lets us put a lot more into a smaller package. It's more efficient, uses less energy, it costs less, it's easier to maintain, and it's also very scalable. So it kind of checks all the boxes, right? Another thing that's very important about the platform is that you've got to build security and compliance in by design. And when I say by design, if I take an existing platform that's already built out and I want to go back and add security and compliance and all these things to it, it's extremely difficult to do that because those concepts weren't built in from the beginning. You're trying to shoehorn these things in. So one of the things that was great is we had the benefit of starting with a completely blank slate. And so we said, okay, let's use standards, technology and security standards right from the beginning, and we build the platform on top of those standards. So that makes it, A, much more secure, but B, it also makes it much more cost effective because to try to add that later would be almost impossible. And frankly, I think that's one of the challenges that the county has. I mean, it's acknowledged that the county went from a 30-year-old system, and they've been adapting that over time. So it's hard to go back and add security to that. In this case, we've got it right from the beginning. Of course, when we're talking about ransomware attacks and things like that, cyber incidents, backup and recovery is absolutely huge. So we've built a lot of layers of redundancy into this that we'll talk about. These technologies from an ROI perspective are pretty incredible. And Jerry had mentioned earlier that there's a $360,000 a year expense right now going to the county for support. And while I don't know the exact ROI number, what we're able to provide by using this new technology gives you an ROI in this investment within a few years, which is pretty impressive, especially when you consider that this has all been scaled for a 5 to 7 year lifespan. So I would anticipate that the city saves the taxpayers a significant amount of money by implementing something like this, while also significantly increasing the availability of these systems and the support that your end users and citizens get. So, and just to give you an example to kind of, visualize this. This is a legacy infrastructure that would get the job done, and don't worry about what the pieces are. I guess the main thing I'd like you to notice there is that there's 6 pieces of equipment that would be necessary at a minimum level to get the job done for Traverse City. What we propose is this hyper-converged infrastructure. And so with HCI, that same infrastructure now is supported by essentially 3 pieces of equipment. And when you take a look at that, it reduces your cost by about 42%. And I like this one too. It reduces your power consumption by about 55%, right? So that's a real win-win. It's cost-effective. We've reduced power consumption, and it's right-sized for the city, giving us that 5 to 7 years of growth. So anyway, that's a little bit about how we can maximize your technology by using these latest standards. So let's talk a little bit about data security and backup. So there's a lot of terms here, right? PCI DSS, Zero Trust, MFA, multi-factor authentication. Let's just start with the most simple one, MFA, multi-factor. That's kind of the most entry-level gold standard right now for any security. I mean, how many times does your bank, your credit union, whoever, they're constantly telling you, you've got to turn on your multi-factor. That's something that wasn't built in before. That's part of why we're here today, right? So, we've got MFA built in. Zero Trust is another standard that we like to use. And what Zero Trust means is that we like to start with the user having no access to anything. When you log in, you have nothing. And then what we do is we peel back the onion and we allow access based on that user's needs. And so what that helps us with is, let's say a threat actor does get access to your systems, they're now confined to a very small portion of your technology versus potentially being able to branch out across your entire network, which frankly is a challenge now, as we saw, because everybody was kind of affected. We had DPW affected, we had Boardman affected. So we want to be able to stop these things before they can spread. And then the last standard I just want to mention briefly is PCI DSS. Now, PCI DSS is very interesting. PCI stands for Payment Card Industry, and it's data security standard. This relates primarily to credit card theft, right? And while the city does have credit cards and you do have in-scope data, I think PCI is more important as a standard from the perspective of this. If you hired us and you said, please come in and write a modern security standard for us that we can implement for all of our systems, you would pay us to essentially write the PCI DSS, which was authored by Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express, who are obviously extremely concerned with protecting data, right? I mean, credit card gets stolen, that's a big deal. So we are experts in that area. As mentioned before, we are certified as a level 1 managed service provider by Visa, and it allows us to use these standards and apply them to situations like this so that we can ensure that you're properly protected. So anyway, long story short, these standards are absolutely crucial to ensuring the long-term security of the city's data, and we've got those built in from the beginning. A few other quick things just to talk about, and I mentioned this, I hit on this very briefly, network segmentation. When I'm on the network at DPW or LEC or wherever, I should not just have free access across the entire enterprise to see everything within the network, okay? So that's segmentation. And then we take it down a lower level than that, and I'll use the LEC again. LEC may have stored information for detectives, and they might have front desk computers. Within the network at the location, segmentation needs to take place there as well, so that if somebody plugs a USB drive, say, into the front office computer, they can't breach the detective's computer because it's on a segmented network. Those are things, again, that are very simple concepts, but the trick is you have to implement them properly. You got to implement them ideally up front. And so we have an opportunity to do that now, along with distributing firewalls across the locations. And again, the importance of that is by having a firewall out at each one of the locations, we're able to monitor all the ingress and egress traffic that's taking place at those locations, so that if there's an issue at a remote location, we can detect that and stop it before it's able to spread across the entire network. So you can think of it as a floodgate as well as a sensor that allows us to detect problems before they can spread. And then another thing, too, that I think is really interesting is transparency, right? And when we talk about transparency, it's very important that you have some benchmark that you can use to tell where your network is at. And so we have something a concept called internal and external vulnerability scanning. And what that does is it scans your entire networks from the outside in. Like, I'm a threat actor out on the internet. We scan outside in. What could I see from the internet? And then we also scan internal on the inside of the network, so we can say, okay, if I did get inside, what can I do? And what this does is it allows us to detect issues essentially in 360 degrees and be proactive about it. So we can go to Jerry and say, okay, look, Jerry, this computer over here, we found this vulnerability on it. We need to patch it, update it, firewall, whatever. But that transparency and visibility is something the city has never had before, and it just allows you to react ahead of time and be proactive rather than finding out later that there's an issue. Endpoint protection is another big piece of this that we've already gotten in place as part of the cyber incident. And there's 3 tiers of people watching this. The city gets information on it, we get information on it, and then also the service provider of the software gets information on it. They have a threat team, threat hunt team that's also looking at it. So that's a big deal because now we've got 3 sets of eyes 24/7 looking at what's happening with the city computers, able to take action if anything were to happen. And then finally on the backup technology, this is just absolutely huge. We want at least 2 kinds of backups. So the first one is a local backup. And the reason we have that local backup is speed. If something blows up right now, that local backup, we can pull that data off and get that machine back up and running within minutes. However, the issue is that a ransomware threat actor, when they come in, they look for your backups. They want to destroy your backups, right? I mean, the goal for them is to destroy all your data and then try to get a ransom out of you. So if you have got a backup, obviously you're not going to pay a ransom. So that's where an immutable offsite backup comes into play. We've got that built into the plan. So we have the local backup is the one that we would use 99% of the time. But if there ever was a cyber incident, that immutable offsite backup is the one we go to. And by immutable, it means it cannot be changed. So if there was a ransomware attack, they cannot breach the barrier to delete that backup or alter it in any way. So that's a big piece of the puzzle here. Jerry mentioned earlier about being very cautious about the transition. This is a big transition, make no mistake. While the systems that the city has are relatively simple, it is still a complex process to move all of this and properly transition it to the new infrastructure. So it does take a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of structure that's involved, and there's frankly going to be a lot of checkpoints and back and forth with the county step by step as we go through this. I like to think of it as a series of one-way doors, right? So as we go through them, we got to make darn sure that we're ready to go to the next step and we're all on board. So we've broadly broken this down into 2 phases. The first one is the building and testing phase. And this is the part where we get the city, the infrastructure that the city needs to function, right? So the first one is the networks. We need to get technology, firewalls and switches and wireless access points out at the city location so that we can assume control of the networks at the locations and start bringing them on to the new infrastructure. So we get the location networks deployed. The server hardware needs to be deployed here at this facility. So we've got a location selected for that. That involves getting racks installed, the server equipment gets installed, power is worked out. All of those things need to take place. We then install those servers on site. And then we kind of start the process here with this initial data transfer. And so what we would do is request copies of the virtualized servers, which are the data that the county has. We would request copies of those that are provided to us that we then load into the city's new infrastructure. And so what that allows us to do is start lab testing each one of those systems. So GIS, BSNA, each one by one. We test them in the new infrastructure in an offline state so that we can ensure that everything is working as expected. We work out any bugs that might exist, and then we refine our plan so that the plan now matches what our findings were during that work. So once that validation and testing is completed, we essentially have everything moved, but the data is all out of date, right? Because they were copies that they gave us before. So that's where we move to phase 2, which is the active migration phase, which is roughly that 90-day transition period. So the city manager would notify the county clerk that the clause is being invoked, which it doesn't necessarily have to be invoked then, but that's kind of what the plan has been. And then what we would do now is each one of those systems, we would migrate them one by one, because we've already determined what that process is going to be. So we know what to expect. In the event that there was an issue, we do have a failback plan with the county. We would just simply roll back to them for that service, and then we would figure out what the issue was and try again. Within a several-week period, the CD data would be moved over to the new infrastructure. Everything would be fully moved. And at the end of the period, we have a roughly 10-day buffer period in case there's any unexpected issues. And during that time, the county contract would be in full effect. So we would have their full support without anything special required to get them to assist us at that point. And then finally, we would come upon the contract termination, and then we'd be fully moved over. So those are our 2 phases. Now that we've got everything moved over, right? Great. We've got servers installed. We've got everything moved over. It's secure. It's great. But this thing's got to be supported and managed, right? Now, a lot of that's going to fall on Jerry, but some of it's going to fall outside of Jerry and his team's expertise. And so what we proposed was a hybrid support model where city IT and our team work together as one. And we've actually already kind of been doing that informally, just as a matter of exploring and gathering the data that we needed to put this project together. But that gives you the best of both worlds, right? You've got your on-site, hands-on people tied in with experts in all of the different areas. You don't need to hire a network engineer. You don't need to hire an Active Directory administrator. We've got them all, and they're right here working with Jerry on a first-name basis day in and day out. So it's a great way of doing things, and frankly, why we can do things so cost-effectively. We would maintain the systems to the PCI DSS 4.0, which is the latest standard, and then as well as some other standards that come into play. So for example, with the Law Enforcement Center, Lean has specific standards that are required. So all of those standards would be built into this and part of it, so that we could demonstrate at any time that the city is meeting the necessary compliance standards. Again, something that has never happened in the past. 24/7 by 365 emergency support is a big deal. We did do a survey with the police officers, and they pretty much across the board were very frustrated with just the lack of them being able to get the technical support they need on a 24/7 basis in order to conduct their duty. It was just it was a massive issue, and it's something that's very easy to fix. You just have to have the resources. And then again, just across the board, critical systems, the mobile data terminals, public safety, the infrastructure itself, all of those things fall under this support and management where it's a hybrid model, all of us working together. So let's talk a little bit about the transition costs. I know that was brought up previously, and I'd just like to maybe go a little bit deeper on that. So all in, Boardman I think is about $360,000. We've also identified roughly another $120,000 in costs going to the county from the Law Enforcement Center. So all in, I estimate it's roughly about $500,000 a year that's being paid for all services from the city to the county. So when you're talking about that kind of budget, in the efficiency that we're able to bring with this new platform, it virtually pays for itself in under a year, around a year, and it's pretty quick. So talking about the costs, though, we talked about those server costs earlier. 84% of those costs are for direct city assets. So that would be hardware and licensing that the city would get. And about 16 of the costs are labor and services that we're providing to design this, build it, implement it. So our cost is very minor as far as the overall total cost. And then this breakdown here just kind of shows you dollar-wise and percent-wise. But as you can see there, that blue segment, roughly $300,000 is all hardware that the city needs to make this work. The licensing is about $105,000. The majority of that going to Microsoft. That's just Microsoft's cost for the licensing. And I guess I should mention on that, the timing worked out really good because Microsoft just released Server 2025. And so we're able to take advantage of that licensing, which gives you an additional 3 years of life that you would not have on the old licenses. So that was actually a good thing, extending the lifetime of those licenses. And then, as I mentioned, 16% or roughly $75,000 is just implementation costs for us, hands out, building it, implementing it, training the city's IT staff on how it all works. So yeah. Lastly, bringing this all together and kind of concluding this, the goals here, one, mitigate the risks that were highlighted by the 2024 cyber incident. Obviously, we saw the holes that were there. Those have to be plugged. We don't want to have a problem moving into the future. We need to get IT control transition to the city. That's a big piece of it. The theme that we've seen over and over and over again, both in talking to city staff as well as in the surveys we did, was that they feel it just takes too long to get things done and they have to jump through too many hoops. And so that needs to be reduced so that people can get back to work and not have to be worrying about computer issues. Again, those security frameworks are huge. The future threats are there. Anything and everyone that's connected to the internet is a threat. And then on top of that, once you've been hit, now you're on the radar. So they will be coming back. There's no doubt about it. We can do this while achieving significant cost and energy savings. We empower and augment the city IT so they can provide better services. And then, we lay a foundation for the future, right? Secure, scalable, and efficient IT that the city has not had, at least in the last 3 decades. And so, just to kind of pull it all together, we really look at it, this is not just an IT upgrade, but it genuinely is an investment in the city's IT infrastructure for the future, allowing the city to do the things that the city needs to do, kind of under your own terms and more efficiently. So that's what I've got. Any questions?
Go ahead, Mai.
I have a couple. So as pertains to the June cyber incident, do we know the full scope of the data impacted at this time?
Officially, no.
And has the vulnerability that allowed for that incident to kind of cripple city functions the way that it did, has that been addressed or resolved at this time?
The root vulnerability was mitigated by the county, to my understanding.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Jackie.
I'm wondering, in terms of the investment in hardware, there's a pretty significant chunk for hardware purchase, and I presume that's not solely server hardware, but other hardware. Is there any share of existing hardware that's going to be retained and become part of this structure moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the hardware, so like all of your monitors and computers, all of those things, they all stay. As far as the new things, they're replacements for virtually all of it is end of life or going to be end of life within the next, say, 12 months. So that's firewalls, switches, servers that you don't have, right? There's power equipment, power conditioning, racks. So that's how it's all broken out. But the switches that you have today, we've evaluated them. Most of them are end of life, if not already end of life. Some of them I think are owned by the county, so it's not necessarily the city's infrastructure. We looked at it. We like to be efficient. We couldn't find anything that made any sense to try to hang on to. Just there wasn't much there. However, the computers, monitors, all those things, those are good.
Thank you.
I guess one other thing I would mention is that the software licensing was an issue as well. We definitely found issues there where either the city needs to true up their licensing, let's put it that way, for the new environment.
Further questions? Go ahead.
Earlier, you said you'd be compartmentalizing things that need to be on the cloud and stuff that should be stored locally only. First, whose cloud?
So an example of like
Google
cloud
Drive or
so
your cloud?
Right now, the city's using like G Suite, for example, for email.
Yeah.
So that's an example of where, I would not recommend that the city take the email and move it in-house and set up your own, Exchange server or something like that. So I think that's an example where keeping on the cloud makes sense. Other systems like GIS, BSNA, those we would definitely recommend keeping in-house at this time.
And there'd be redundancies anywhere, or
Yeah,
just
that's a great
the
point.
one format and one location doesn't?
Yeah, that's a great point. So the way that the infrastructure is set up, in fact, I can come back here. All right, so just gives you an example. So each one of the servers, which are the dark units on the left-hand side, each one of those are what we call a workload server. So those are what are actually handling the workload of the city. Each one is running at approximately 25% capacity, all right? And so we've got two of those. And so what that does for us is if one of those were to fail, your workload immediately shifts to the other device. So normally we have it split, and they're each handling different parts of your workload. But if the top, let's call it the A server, fails, the workload is immediately shifted down to the B server. Now everything runs off of the B server, and then we've got multiple copies of the data on both the A server and the B server that are kept in sync constantly. So
But
there's
Is that one location, or is there
it-
anywhere stored off-site?
yeah. So we do have a backup, an off-site backup, in the event that something were to. So let's just say this building, it got wiped out, natural
Yeah.
disaster happened. We do have a plan right now at the LEC that there will be a server there that will have a backup of everything.
That's good. Thank you.
Other questions, or as we mentioned, these are broken out. So the next part that we have a motion for would just be the professional services and hardware to start and go through the transition, which was covered as part of that, the presentation that we just got. So I would take a motion, or if somebody has more questions, go ahead. Go ahead, Heather.
No, I don't have any questions. I have a statement.
Okay.
I was trying to remember when I first heard about Millennium Digital Technology when I first heard the name of the company. I was at the agenda meeting last week. As you can see in the agenda, it does not actually name the company. We were in closed session last week as well, talking about the separation, but that was really with the attorneys about the county separation. Maybe the name came up, but I don't recall it. So it wasn't until I opened my packet and that I was able to open up their website and take a look at them. And I was a little disappointed that they didn't have any, they didn't have a client list, that they're really talking about grocery stores. And I'm going to finish, please. And then yesterday, a whole slew of emails arrived through my government account. Some of them were questioning the ability of a small company to handle such a, you know, a medium-sized municipality. Again, what other municipalities does this company represent? There was also, there were questions about such a large no-bid contract going out to a first-time vendor. There was, you know, what's the history? Who has this company worked for? Where's the vendor list? And then there were a couple of other emails that revealed a conflict of interest. A relationship between the owner of this company and our city manager. Now, I feel like over the last year we have had a lot of voter confidence issues. There was the upzone last year, there was the master plan this year, there was the TIF 97 extension this year, there was the 326 land lawsuit just last week. And here we are back again. I think that there's a question of trust here, and there's been a lack of transparency, and that this contract, that both B and C require a normal purchasing process that the city normally goes through, an RFP for services. Right now, Millennium Digital Technology is the easy choice, but it's not the right choice. They may end up in the future being the right choice, but right now we need some transparency. We need some clarity in this room to show that we are doing our due diligence and that we are representing everyone, the citizens and the commissioners as well. I will be not supporting B or C.
Commissioner Stanley, you have your hand up.
I do. I absolutely concur that accountability and transparency are critical. So I also want to state that Millennium Digital has been our boots on the ground for the last 5.5 months, responding to a critical breakdown in our IT infrastructure. They have been providing services in collaboration with city staff. However, that came about, I cannot speak to, and I'm not going to conjecture. However, what we're talking about is 84% of this current motion before us is for the purchase of equipment. My understanding is that that would be at government rates, so that's pretty transparent and straightforward. A very small proportion of that is for the actual services from Millennium Digital, and I am not comfortable as a representative of our citizens and of this body with waiting for an RFP for this particular piece of the transition. I think it's been stated, but I would like to restate that the fallout from the cyber incident is not fully understood or known at this time. We remain, as you said, we remain vulnerable because we've been attacked, and they got a 2-for-1. That was a great deal for that bad actor to take down 2 units of government in one fell swoop. I will be supporting this piece before us, but I would request that we have an RFP for the continuing services after the transition. We are not going to invoke the 90-day termination clause until after the first of the year. There's plenty of time to put together an RFP and bring back proposals for this body to review. And other entities who may want to submit proposals now know what Millennium Digital would charge us and what services they are offering for those rates. So I think this part, though, we cannot afford to wait for an RFP for this piece of the transition. And further, I would like to state that asserting that there is a conflict of interest is an incredibly profound statement to make. And I would like to know what the basis of that is, because if we're talking about a conflict of interest and a $500,000 contract, that's a serious allegation. That's all.
Thank you. Yeah.
I believe Commissioner Shaw asked to Millennium Digital Technologies clientele. Given his nature of the work, unlike when you go to an architecture firm and see the client list or an engineering firm, that's not necessarily how this industry works, and I can leave that to Mr. Andrews to answer, and I can answer some other questions.
For obvious reasons, we don't go out there advertising who we work with, but we work with extremely large companies. We work with many governments, federal, local, municipalities. That's what we do. But we don't go out advertising that. I don't want to make myself and my clients targets. So we do our work, we do it hard, but we don't go out there pumping our chest and saying, I've got a huge client list. The results are what sell us and why we get referrals.
Yes, Commissioner.
Well, as I said before, Millennium Digital may be the best choice, but we don't know because Millennium Digital is the only company in the room right now. They have been the only company in the room right now, and we're talking about $600,000 on a with no competitive bidding, and I'm not sure that I don't agree with Commissioner Stanley that we go ahead and purchase the hardware, because if Millennium Digital doesn't end up being the company that we go with for services, there may be a different list of technology that we need to purchase.
These are absolutely industry standard equipment. I mean, these are Dell servers, Microsoft licensing. I mean, this is the bread and butter of IT globally.
At this time, the motion that has not been made yet, if someone wanted to make it, is just for the professional services and hardware. As we have just heard, we are still dealing with fallout from the cyber attack. We are still vulnerable. We are still in the situation we've been in. I think that there's a discussion on C and potentially, I think, some consulting of a totally different motion, which would be that long-term service agreement. But for B, the question is, how do we move forward without the request is without more delay to keep us from being more vulnerable. So do we have a motion for B or not, is I guess what I'm putting to you all.
I'll make the motion that the competitive bidding process be waived and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute the necessary documents with Millennium Digital Technologies for professional services and hardware acquisition associated with the separation of IT services from Grand Traverse County in the not-to-exceed amount of $518,634.86, which includes a 10% contingency, and that a budget amendment be approved in the amount of up to $520,000 to come from the general fund balance, with such documents subject to approval as to their substance by the city manager and their form by the city attorney.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Treadwell. Thank you, Commissioner Stanley. Go ahead, Commissioner Warner.
Yeah, I agree that it's very likely that Millennium Digital Technologies will end up with this, but I'm not comfortable waiving the competitive bidding process for a $500,000 contract. Yes, the city's been working with them for some months now, but at some point during that time, it would have been, I'm sure it did become apparent to city staff that this step would be needed at some point. And so there was a decision, whether it was conscious or subconscious, to keep moving ahead toward this date that we're at right now without planning appropriately for the competitive bidding process. So I don't see that there is not a sense of urgency. Yes, it's unfortunate, but we can still go through that process. Millennium Digital Technologies has spec'd out what they're recommending, so it is entirely likely that they will be the winner of such a bidding process. But as a government entity, I feel it's our obligation to go through that process.
Go ahead, Jackie.
I'd like to ask a question about the timing implications of a competitive bidding process at this point.
It would take a bit of time to put together the RFP and to put it out, so I can't speak to exactly how long it would take. I'm sorry, I'm trying to answer one question and then answer yours. Probably in the early new year, or maybe before Christmas.
So 8 weeks, maybe?
And then, well, I mean, that's just to get the RFP out, then it needs
Right.
to be out for a month, and then you have to make a decision. So that would be, it would be at least 3-4 months at least.
Okay, thank you.
That's just an estimate. Yes,
ahead.
Commissioner?
Do we have, so Millennium Digital has been here working alongside city staff since the cyber incident in June. Do we have all the information that we would need to provide to other vendors who have not been present in an RFP for them to be able to answer an RFP efficiently? Because if we don't know the full scope of what has been impacted, do we have sufficient information to put forth an RFP for this piece?
So I'm going to answer it a little differently. Up until we retained Millennium Digital Technologies in June, I wouldn't have had any information to put an RFP out. That's how instrumental they have been. So now we could put an RFP out, now that we've done 5.5 months of work to get to this point. But in that moment, or even in July, August, just the idea of putting out an RFP, because we don't own our own data, we don't have access to our own network. It would have been a very difficult task at that time to put an RFP out. So I hope that answers your question.
Maybe I can help. So we had to work backwards, right? So we had to take the systems as they exist and then work backwards to figure out what the standards would be in order to implement an infrastructure that would support that, if that makes sense. So essentially, we had to build that from absolutely no knowledge whatsoever, other than here's a box and it's working. Now work backwards and tell me what's inside of it and how it functions. So, I mean, just to be frank, anybody else that's gonna reply, or they're gonna have to do the same thing. I mean, because there is no documentation anywhere that explains how all this works.
So if, hypothetically,
Yes.
if you, Millennium Digital, were responding to an RFP for this project, but you hadn't been the Millennium Digital on the ground for the last 5.5 months, how long would it take you to be able to prepare adequately an RFP for this project?
Probably 4 to 6 months.
Thank you.
Do you have other questions? I'm going to just make a point here, because I think when we have up here conversations dealing with allusions and allegations that aren't proven or even proper, a conflict of interest by our policies is monetary gains, which is not anything that's been indicated or have proof for up here, just to make that clear. But we do have a situation where, as we've been getting updates and as we've had discussions, this continues to be a Gordian knot that's being unknotted to try and even keep us functional. That is where this hardware acquisition, to say that we got to a certain point where now we could go out for bid, there's a lot out there that we still don't have in hand. That is why I can understand why staff didn't, why Mr. Swanson and the rest of the staff didn't come to us and say, oh, let's put the brakes on right now and let's put this part of the hardware out for bid. I think when we have the discussion and the motion for C about the 3-year professional contract, it's a very different situation. I think that where we're at right now, to be safe and effective and efficient, we need to not spend another 4 months waiting to get hardware in place and starting to shore up where we're at as an institution, because we are an institution that has already been breached in this past 12 months. And so while I'm not a huge fan of waiving the competitive bidding process, I think the only time I truly advocate for us not to continually have the conversation is when it comes to the wastewater treatment center, because there's only like 2 companies that do it, and we are in contract with one of them. This is one of those cases where this is a sense of urgency behind it, even if, as I think was used earlier as a description, the hair on fire and we can't make payroll, which is where we very real were a few months ago. We aren't in that much crisis right now, but I don't think we can say safely that we are not needing to do more work to keep our data and our systems safe. So I wanted to make that very clear that while everyone up here is very calm, all of us, all of staff, that doesn't mean that there aren't bigger things going on behind the scenes that our staff is managing very well. And just as a clarification point, because I get this asked this a lot, if you come into the city office, if you come into the city building, if you come here to Boardman and you say, can I see the mayor in their office? Or can I see Commissioner Warner or Commissioner Stanley in their office? We don't have offices. We're not staff here. We're not meant to be staff here. There's a very hard line in the charter that's delineated us from, other than the city manager and the city attorney, what we do and what staff does. And for that reason, because we hire professional staff, because we deal in professional staff, if they're, excuse me, I just caught, telling us that we are still needing this to be safe and to be functional, I'm going to believe them. And so that's where I'm at with this. So do we have other questions at this time? Go ahead, Jackie.
In reading our purchasing policy for the city, there were 2 reasons that we would waive competitive bidding. One was an emergency, and one was being in the public interest. And I wondered if there's any information that staff could share along those 2 lines that would help us to better evaluate the situation.
I'd look to Liz or even to Jerry.
Well, the city still doesn't have control of its own data, and that for me is the bigger problem. We're still in the midst of the cyber attack, and without speaking to our outside counsel, I don't want to comment any further on that, but it's not over. And so we're still in an area of unknown, and so I believe that covers both the emergency status and the interest of the public for us to move forward. And again, this has been 5.5 months of work. And the team has been working really hard around the clock to put together something that is moving at an appropriate speed with all the appropriate checkpoints and working collaboratively with the county in order to achieve that goal.
I don't see other takers, so thank you for that question. It's a good one. Mr. Swanson, did you want to? Oh, please, Heidi's standing up too.
I just wanted to say one thing.
Introduce yourself really quickly.
Heidi
Sorry,
Tepe, I'm the city treasurer. When we saw the dollar amount, I was like, oh, no bids. But then at the same token, I'm doing backups, and it's usually taking probably 6 hours of my time. It's running in the background all the time, just for that shock value. We didn't have a system for so long, and it's just something we're still kind of worried about it, even though we know secure things are in place, but things always happen. So we're still reeling from it.
Thank you. Jerry, it looked like, did you have anything or not? Okay.
Mostly just to add that, going through the cyber incident, we just felt like we didn't have some of the control that it was kind of like we felt a little vulnerable. And so, Just a lot of thoughts gone into it, and I mean, I'm not, mirror what Liz says, it's just that we've reached that point, I think, where we have to, kind of control our own destiny, at least for the initial part here, to just have that sense of security.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Just one more point of clarification. The prices for the hardware, which is the lion's share of this proposal. You mentioned municipal pricing or government pricing. Is there any more detail available about that?
I believe Mr. Andrews can answer that question.
Yes, I can. So I anticipate that, I think there's the 10% contingency, but I want to say without that, we were roughly $438,000 for the entire project. We mentioned $75,000 of that was services, and then we've got roughly $100,000 worth of software. I expect that number to go down. One of the challenges that we've had is that this Server 2025 product from Microsoft, like, literally just came out a few weeks ago, and they don't have that fully skewed up yet in all of their systems. So because of the urgency and the timeframes involved, we used essentially their standard pricing for that, knowing that it's going to come in less. So once we get that final number from Microsoft, which we're actively working on, I expect it to come in, significantly less. And I'll just say, as a matter of experience, we don't ever use contingency funds. We've put a tremendous amount of work into planning this thing, so I think it's going to be well under $500,000.
And the Microsoft server software would be in that software
Yes, correct.
bump. How about the hardware?
Yeah, so
is there government special pricing for hardware that is?
The hardware,
standardly
not so
available?
much. I hate to say this, but the government pricing for hardware is normally higher. So we can actually do better on that than the hardware pricing. So the hardware, I know where that's at, but the software, I for sure know that we can get, and it's not a significant amount, it's a few points, but we'll take whatever we can. So we've already registered the city with Microsoft, and we're in the process right now of working through that process with them.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead, Mark.
I know we've been avoiding discussing some of the other things that Commissioner Shaw addressed as far as trust in government, et cetera. In my experience, people tend to always connect dots in anything. And so in this instance, I did not get a slew of emails. I got one email. And it was from an individual that identified themselves by name, but didn't clarify whether they're a city resident or not. And the email address appears to come from a potential competitor. So not knowing who this person is or what this person is, I'm to think that something's just being delivered to us to stir something up that may not be so. And that's my thoughts on that. I'm in the photo with a lot of people that I know. I'm in photos with you, and if you tend to do business somewhere that I'm connected to, I don't know that necessarily proves to be a conflict of interest. The same as there's been several prior working relationships that have been brought to this city that we have had no issue going forward with. There was a point in time, Commissioner Werner outright asked a prior city manager to hire somebody specific. I'm not sure if he knew them or not, but he said, this is a good example of a great business. I think you should hire them for this. And so we had an interim city manager who brought somebody who had a prior working relationship with them. It was agreed upon by the commission and the city staff that this is a fit connection for the situation. In this, from what I understand, our city manager deferred to a connection from the past in an emergency situation that we needed help. We needed guidance. Is this something that you have a background in? And they stepped up to the plate, and I don't see any indication that there's a financial benefit personally, any personal gain to that.
I have a practical question. I appreciate that point, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson. In the meantime, I think this is something else that, a little bit in the vein, but I won't attribute it because I think she's following better than I am, that Commissioner Anderson mentioned. But, so if this were to take 4 months more or so, and I think this might be a question for Jerry, we would then be still on the server with fully on server with the county, fully on there Monday through Friday, customer service, and fully on the schedule that we've been going on right now as we've been trying to kind of not speed up the process, obviously. Again, we're not trying to throw this off and speed ahead without due diligence, but that we are trying to move this forward so we can get out of this limbo. That would, if we were waiting on this, that would confine us to that current situation, correct?
Yeah, and one more thing, which was mentioned in one of the memos, not to complicate it, but currently there's work being done to actually take the city off of the county's network, actually separate. And to that regard, we were using this also as part of that opportunity, as part of the split, because we are going to end up in a situation where we have to figure out all sorts of consequences of that, because, and again, I don't want to like get too complicated with what I'm trying to explain, but essentially it was aligning with the current timeline that the county's been working on to kind of segment the networks. And so that was a great opportunity for us to leverage that project to help us assist with the separation. So it does complicate that a little bit because we'll have to figure out how that timeline can align with that other project that was going on with the county's IT department. So we'll have to get back on how that might impact it.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Has the city ever waived the competitive bidding process for a $500,000 project before?
I think so. What do arts usually come in for? Wastewater. Wait, is Art's got an answer.
Feel like we do every year.
Yeah.
With a first-time vendor.
Art Krieger, Director of Utilities with the city. I believe it was waived for the long-term 10-year Jacobs contract to operate and maintain the wastewater treatment plant. But we did have a long, extensive experience with them, over 30 years in running.
Yeah, I was going to say we've waived with Jacobs several times, and their former iterations.
Art, was the pipelining project that we just did, was that single source?
It was.
And that was like 1.5 million, I want to say?
Yeah, we added a small contingency onto it for a water main lining project that was just basically completed this fall with FERPAL. That was a construction company that had the single source lining material and techniques, and it was about 1.7 million.
And we had never used that before.
That's correct.
Right.
And that was, we waived the competitive bidding process?
Yes,
or
that was a
just
single
there was
source.
only one
Yep.
source?
Yes. Well, waive the competitive bidding process, yes. Go ahead, Tim.
I would just point out that good governance still requires a competitive bidding process. And just because we waive it at some point does not make it the right thing to do.
Are there other questions? I'm going to open this up for public comment. Please approach the podium if you'd like to make public comment on this particular motion. So the motion on the not to exceed to purchase hardware and services.
And I'll state the rules for public comment. Please state your name and address. Indicate if you're a city resident, non-city resident, or city business owner. We have a 3-minute time allotment. When your time is up, the timer will beep. And we ask that all language be respectful to everyone. Thank you.
Mr. Mead, 630 Cottage Drive, Apartment 1B. I'm Traverse City resident. Yes, the hardware and the software, all of that has to change over. I mean, if we're still connected to the hip to the county and let's say this happens again, we're not going to shore it up or anything with the hardware or software. I mean, that's kind of like, isn't that the terminology of doing the sanity of doing the same thing over and over and over again? So let's just go ahead and do the status quo of, well, we should have done it, but we didn't do it. And so if we get cyber attacked and we weren't being proactive and being preventive of that, well, isn't that our own faults? So, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Shaw?
No.
Commissioner Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes.
Commissioner Werner?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes.
And Mayor Shamrow?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now we'll move on to Part C of this. Commissioner Stanley approached me just before the meeting saying that she had consulted with our attorney on an alternate motion that should be legally sound. Commissioner Warner and I might remember a Monday before Christmas where we had to come in to correct an amendment that wasn't done properly, so I know that the i's were dotted and t's were crossed. So Commissioner Stanley, did you want to start with that?
Sure, and perhaps the city attorney can remind me, I believe what you said was that I'd like to make the recommendation that the city manager issue a request for proposals for the 3-year IT services as identified in item C.
And to bring that back
And to
for
bring that back
consideration by
for
the city
consideration.
commission at a future date?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
Well done. Well done. All right.
Could
we, we'll let Benjamin finish typing as fast as he is and then have him repeat it back to us,
I
please.
think what I heard is that the city manager issue a request for proposals for the 3-year IT services as identified in agenda item new business 1C to be brought back to the city commission at a future date.
Okay. Does anyone want to second that motion?
I'll support.
Thank you. Stanley and Anderson. Okay, so as we've kind of discussed that we're building this out now, we've got this threat we're taking care of, but the long term is that we are going to be functionally controlling our own IT, and that is a service that will be, by this motion, bid out to the public through a request for proposal process per our usual policy. So that is where the motion stands right now. Do we have questions or comments from fellow commissioners? Okay. Seeing none, do we have any public comment on this motion? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and lastly, with all of these changes and looking forward, there's a request here for a information technology specialist full-time non-union position. So I don't know if we want to start with you, city manager, or if Mr. Swanson would like to jump up. I see him ready.
Yes, in your board packet, we've prepared to have another addition to the IT staff, a IT support specialist that Mr. Swanson can speak to. And again, we will be going out to RFP as the board has just requested for a 3-year agreement or a longer, we'll see how that RFP looks, but for IT-related services. And we do want it to be boots on the ground, internal, and have some supports external as we get this department up and running. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, so obviously, right now is using the county. They obviously have a fully staffed IT department, and they're located on the 3rd floor. So there is a lot of foot traffic in this building. One of the things that the city has is we have lots of sites throughout the city. So water treatment plant, wastewater, water sewer maintenance, Hickory Hills, Department of Public Services, the Marina. We have a lot of sites, so having a additional staff member focusing on city related IT tickets and support is going to be instrumental for us to just maintain probably even an increased presence, just to make sure we're covering all of our geographic footprint, and then also augmenting the support services that we would go out to bid for would help with some of the more complicated and technical, more at the network and server level. So it's kind of a good start to getting us, you know, with some actual staff to help support this endeavor. So.
Does anybody have any questions about the position or any details? Or I would take a motion.
I move that the City Commission authorizes the creation of an IT support specialist position, a full-time, non-union position, to be filled as soon as determined by the city manager, with funds to come from 101261.
Support.
Sorry, that was Mayor Pro Tem Wilson. That's
Yeah.
the second. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Anderson and Mayor Pro Tem Wilson. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for all for that, getting through that large topic. And with that, speaking of new positions, we will move on to the discussion of authorizing the creation of an EMS administrator position for those of you who have been waiting eagerly for updates since last year's millage proposal passed for our EMS services. This is yet another step to getting us there. So I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Shamro. Yep, we are making excellent strides in building out the EMS department that was voted on by the city residents in November of 2023. The City Commission has authorized 3 positions that are currently in the process of being filled. We've ordered ambulances that are hopefully on their way in early 2025. We're working out the details of some agreements with the Law Enforcement Center and 520 West Front Street so that our EMS department will have more space. And this is the next step in that process, which would be to post for an EMS administrator who would coordinate those efforts and then run that aspect and report to the chief. So we felt this was the right time to bring that forward and to continue the process.
Great. Does anybody want to make the motion, or does anyone want to hear more? Go ahead,
I
Commissioner
move
Shaw.
that the City Commission authorize the creation and filling of the position of EMS administrator.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Shaw and Mayor Pro Tem Wilson. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Commissioner Anderson.
I had a couple of clarifying questions regarding the position, and then also one that's sort of peripheral. But is training and development a significant part of the job description for this individual?
In what kind of training and development?
I guess sharing their insights and knowledge with the people who are being hired for the city ambulance service. I mean, it sounds as though this is primarily a paperwork position, but it also requires some very specialized knowledge, and I just wondered if that's transferable to others in the department. Will they be needing that sort of training skills?
Well, I would leave that to Chief Tuller to tell us what we would need for his department. Yes, there is a lot of compliance and leadership here to running that department, and it would assist with management as well, budget. But in terms of training, I think if we found the right candidate with translatable skills, we would get them the kind of training that they would need. But I would like to have Chief speak to that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Jim Tuller, Fire Chief for the City of Traverse City. Great question. Thank you, Commissioner. We have our medical training covered right now with our current training officer, and we use some area agencies and third parties to help us with that. The training that is mentioned specific to this job is more focused in the area, obviously, of medical, but it's also helping our people become better at some certain aspects of their job that are kind of paperworky related. It's more like how to correctly fill out a patient care report or a PCR. Because, you know, as was illustrated back when with ad hoc committee was formed and everything, we were looking at projection of revenue being brought in. Well, lo and behold, there's a certain way things have to be written to hit the mark so that billing service can successfully build an insurance company. And it's not playing a game. It's not very on the up and up, but that's how we can train some of our new personnel. Most of the personnel that we're onboarding here as of over the past year are right out of college or a fire academy, and so they don't have a lot of experience. They have the certification, so this person will also bring them along with their experience and help mold them into you know, good paramedics and firefighters, you know, for the community. But great question, thank you. Any other questions while I'm up here? If not, I'll go sit down.
Yes. It was a multi-part, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I wondered, as I was reading through the description, it seemed as though responsibility for quality assurance
Exactly.
and hitting those performance targets was
Yep.
going to be really important.
Many of the small things that you see in the document, in the packet, and that's not the entire job description. Many of those are covered by other personnel on our department right now that are working shifts. So we're really hopeful, and the plan is to take a lot of those things and put them on this person's desk, and they'll work directly with me and with our personnel to you know, quality assurance. It's making sure those reports are filled out correctly, and they're not handwritten. They're all on tablets of software, and the software keeps updating and all this stuff. But yeah, all those things. I want somebody to help me do that over here, and to answer to me on that, and also to answer you in some respects. So
Is the objective to kind of step up beyond where we are currently in terms of performance measures? Are we shooting for, you know, shorter response times, or are there any goals that have
frankly,
been established?
We're going to have, at the end of the day, 10 more people on the department. And so what's being covered now, we're doing really good. But with all the influx of these other people, that's too big of a group to manage with the shift captains and not on-duty personnel. So we need this person in there every day to help me do that. So, yeah, and we have a really good track record, and we're going to maintain that. Yeah, we don't take that for granted. We work hard on that every day.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Other questions for the chief while he's up there? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open up any public comment on this motion. I almost said notion. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Very excited to keep that moving. All right, and last under new business here, authorizing a service agreement to conduct sanitary sewer evaluations. I don't know if you want to take that, Liz, or we're going to have Art.
I would like Mr. Krieger to help us with this one. This predates my arrival, the sanitary sewer I&I, and Mr. Krieger's been at the heart of this, and so if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So this request is for a sanitary sewer evaluation study which focuses on the west side of the city sanitary sewer collection system. This is the area that's most vulnerable to infiltration and inflow. We've seen this from experience in 2020 and 2021 when the water levels in the bay and the rivers were very high, the groundwater. So we did look at the entire city, but we had flow meters in that were measuring flow from the east side during those high water level times as well, and they weren't showing near as much response to storm rainfall events. So this study is actually, it focuses on identifying the I&I, infiltration and inflow sources, and how to go about removing it from our system. It's basically a detective type process that experienced firm goes out, they're basically boots on the ground, and they're reviewing, previous flow data, rainfall correlation to those flows. They're identifying areas that need to be further investigated by methods such as smoke testing or dye testing. And there was a brief description of that in your memo. Basically, it tells you what's connected to the sanitary sewer. So if you find illicit connections or stormwater drains that are coming directly in, the smoke will come out of that particular asset or catch basin maybe, for instance. So we know we have a lot of I&I during the high groundwater level times. Obviously, since the water levels have receded over the last couple years, we've seen a drastic decrease in I&I. But it's a cycle of, we don't know how many years. Climate change seems to be making these cycles shorter together. So we need to act during this drier period, do this investigative work, and go out and make these repairs and fix as many of these I&I situations as possible. So it will evaluate about half of the system. We have around 80 miles total in sanitary sewer collection system. And so this focus on the west side will incorporate about 42 miles. So the RFP process was used in this case earlier this year. We had 3 good firms that had a lot of experience, and we looked at their costs and evaluated them very carefully and did further interviewing. And we're making a recommendation for the budget amount that was set aside out of ARPA funds for $250,000 to recommend OHM advisors for this project. Any questions I can try to answer?
Questions?
I have a little question. How do you choose which areas of the west side you're going to focus on?
So there's a lot of data that we've been accumulating with flow meters out in the system. They're measuring certain points within the collection system where maybe a major branch comes in from a larger area. We're looking at that flow during dry periods, comparing it to what the flow changes during a rainfall event. We have rainfall gauge data to go by on the west side as well. So it's a lot of correlating there, and it's just putting all the facts together. We have a lot of information that was derived during the SAW grant process, and this company actually did the SAW grant for the city, so they're very familiar. But they have, processes in place to track that down and then pinpoint the areas that we really need to investigate. So if you had a dry flow that wasn't much different than a rainfall flow, we could probably say in that area we don't necessarily have to go after it with the finer methods like smoke testing. We move on to the next, flashy type flows that we see based on rainfall.
Can you describe what a resident will see during this smoke testing, and how are the residents going to be informed of this?
Yeah, that was a big part of our interview process with these firms. There is a very important coordination with the fire department and police because it looks like something's on fire. But basically, there's smoke, and it's non-toxic, goes into the piping and through a manhole under forced air like a fan, and it just goes to the least path of resistance, and it'll come out wherever it can into the air, into the atmosphere. Normal plumbing in a house or a building has a vented pipe which is connected to the sanitary sewer, so if it comes out of that, that's not abnormal. We expect that. But it would appear to a resident or somebody on the sidewalk walking by, oh my gosh, there's smoke coming out of that house, out of that pipe. So there is a plan to work through like different sections of neighborhoods and be very proactive and let them know what's coming and what to look for and what to expect, along with coordination with our emergency services and so forth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have your hand up, Tim?
I'll make a motion.
Sure.
I'll make the motion that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute a contract with OHM Advisors in the amount not to exceed $250,000, $234,000 plus a 7% contingency for sanitary sewer evaluation services. Such contract subject as to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney, with funds therefore available in ARPA Fund 285.
Thank you, Commissioner Warner. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. And, oh,
Yeah, just quick. And I had the opportunity to sit down with Mr. Krieger, city attorney and city manager 6 weeks ago or so and talk about this and fill the city manager in, at least on my take of how the discussion went 2 years ago as far as designation of ARPA funds, and why this isn't maybe fantastic in my opinion. It's pretty good, and that's why I made the motion supporting it. The hope 2 years ago had been something a little more proactive in a strategy for addressing it. I'm hoping that we're pleasantly surprised that private laterals, and laterals are what goes from your house to the sewer main, and the homeowner or property owner owns that. It's not the city's, and so it's up to the homeowner to repair that, but there's no obligation to repair that currently. So again, hopefully we're pleasantly surprised. Laterals are in much better shape than we anticipate, and most of the I&I comes from other sources. And then for our students that aren't asleep quite yet, I&I is inflow and infiltration. So our sanitary sewer plant, which is our poop plant, as I tell my kids, treats wastewater. But in a heavy rain, instead of getting 8 million gallons a day, we can get up to 17 million gallons a day. So we get more rainwater going to it than just sanitary water, and we have to pay to treat that. So it's both an environmental concern for overflows on rare occasions, but also just financially, we're paying to treat all that rainwater and we don't need to treat it. So the sooner we can reduce the I&I, the sooner we start saving money and we can invest it in other things. So thank you.
no, thanks for that. I appreciate the history lesson as we've gone through this for the last couple of years. Any other questions of the commission?
Well, I'll just tag on to that and say that one of the best ways to treat stormwater is to plant trees.
Okay, very true.
Take care of the trees in your yards.
Very, very true. All right, with that, I will open this up to public comment. Does anybody have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you all for that. Great to see that ARPA money finally going in that direction. And now we're going on to, for those following at home, the students who, again, might not be asleep yet, as Commissioner Warner so aptly pointed out. We're on to the appointments portion, which usually goes pretty fast and furious, but we have a few of them here as we're catching up. So we'll start with consideration of appointing, or interview committee for Board of Zoning Appeals. Does anybody want to take that motion?
And may I just jump in real quick? I just want to say there's a number of ad hoc committees on your agenda for formulation, and just for the public's information too, there's a few seats where we're a bit behind. We're working on getting those caught up, and in the future I anticipate that we'll establish or bring action to you to establish a subcommittee 3 months before those terms expire. So we are doing a little catch-up work, and it's just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yes,
so.
and we do thank you, as your office has also been managing 3 elections this year and a few other things. So not typical, but we will do some catch-up right now. So does someone want to make the motion for the Board of Zoning Appeals? Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
I recommend that the City Commission Ad Hoc Interview Committee be established to make a recommendation regarding appointments to the Board of Zoning Appeals. 1 seat vacated term expiring June 30th, 2026, and 2 seats vacated term expiring June 30th, 2027, and that Commissioner Werner, Commissioner Anderson, and Commissioner Shaw be appointed to such committee with Commissioner Werner as chair.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. Okay, we got a motion by Anderson, second by Shaw. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now we'll go on to the election, sorry, what is this one? Election Commission. I keep wanting to add a word to that one. Does anybody want to make that motion?
I
Commissioner
move
Shaw.
that the City Commission Ad Hoc Interview Committee be established to make a recommendation regarding 1 appointment to the Election Commission, term expiring December 13th, 2027, currently held by Chris Campbell, and that Mayor Pro Tem Wilson, Commissioner Shaw, and Commissioner Warner be appointed to such committee with Mayor Pro Tem Wilson as chair.
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw and Commissioner Stanley. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all. Moving right along, we've got a recommendation for one term for the Grand Traverse Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. Anybody want to make that one? Go ahead, Tim.
I'll make a motion that the City Commission Ad hoc Interview Committee be established to make a recommendation regarding one appointment to the Grand Traverse County Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, term expiring December 31st, 2027, currently held by John Peck, and that Commissioner Treadwell, Commissioner Stanley, and Commissioner Werner be appointed to such committee with Commissioner Treadwell as chair.
Support.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Warner and Commissioner Anderson. Any public comment on that item? Seeing none, bring it back to the commission. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, moving on to the Joint Planning, Grand Traverse County Commons, Joint Planning Commission, and mine is loading right now, so if somebody wants to go ahead and make that motion. Everybody's is loading.
I'll make a motion that the City Commission Ad hoc Interview Committee be established to make a recommendation regarding one appointment to the Grand Traverse Commons Joint Planning Commission, term expiring May 14th, 2027, currently held by Russ Soyring, and that Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Werner, and Commissioner Treadwell be appointed to such committee with Commissioner Anderson as chair.
Support.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Stanley and Commissioner Treadwell. Any public comment on this item? Oh, go ahead.
Just from Reed, 630 Cottage Drive, Apartment 1B, Traverse City, Michigan. In the ad hoc, you have somebody whose her name is Winnie Simpson, and she is the one that has advertised to being part of the interview process for that. And part of that letter that she gave you guys says, I believe it is important that commons constituencies, residents, workers, and owners have representation on the board, and I would like to serve my community in that role. And my resume is attached. Well, part of her resume is that she was part of the Mercado board and also the village board. And I've been there for about 13, 14 years, and the village association has not really kept up on the property. I asked my community manager, hey, can I get somebody, can I get a hold of somebody for the village association? And it's usually no. And then I talked to Mervines, and the answer is no. So, I cite that the fact that the signage out there sucks. It's old. It's
Point of order.
Yes.
Is this appropriate?
It's somebody in the packet as an application.
Anyways, I'm just telling you the reasons why. Is that, like I said, the property has not been kept up. There's some serious issues that haven't been addressed. She said she's, in the resume, she was the village association president at one point in time. And so, yeah, there's no, like Carlara says that she's, part of the residents there. I'm a resident that lives there, and I can't get a straight answer from why when I go home, I look at all these outdated signs and they look like crap, and I'm sorry about the language. But they were put up but they were not maintained, and it looks ridiculous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. Any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on now to interview for one expiring term for the Housing Commission. Can we get a motion for that? Go ahead.
I move that the City Commission Ad hoc Interview Committee be established to make a recommendation regarding one appointment to the Housing Commission, term expiring November 30th, 2029, currently held by Mitchell Treadwell, and that Mayor Shamrow, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson, and Commissioner Werner be appointed to such committee with Mayor Shamrow as chair.
Support.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, was that Commissioner Anderson for the second?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I was looking down and missed it. And, okay, we're going to go ahead with that. Any public comment on that item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Broke my rhythm there. Got to get back in it. Okay. ad hoc committee for the Local Officers Compensation Commission. Would somebody like to make this motion?
I recommend that the City Commission Ad Hoc Interview Committee be established to make a recommendation regarding 2 appointments to the Local Officers Compensation Commission. 2 terms expired April 22nd, 2022 and April 22nd, 2023, and that Mayor Shamrow, Commissioner Stanley, and Commissioner Werner be appointed to such committee with Mayor Shamrow as chair.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. We've got a motion from Anderson, second by Shaw. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Human Rights Commission, and we have, sorry, mine's loading again. So if anybody's isn't loading and wants to make that motion, we have 5 appointments, it looks like.
I'll make the recommendation that the City Commission Ad Hoc Interview Committee be established to make a recommendation regarding 5 appointments to the Human Rights Commission, 2 terms expiring June 30th, 2027, 2 terms expiring June 30th, 2028, and 1 term expiring June 30th, 2029, and that Mayor Shamrow, Commissioner Shaw, and Commissioner Anderson be appointed to such committee with Mayor Shamrow as chair.
Support.
I'll give that to Warner, just because Anderson has been sacrificed with me on that one. Okay, and just a reminder, as we are talking about that Human Rights Commission is open to county and city residents. It's one of the few that is. So any public comment on that item? Seeing none, bring it back to the commission. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, appointment to the Traverse Area District Library Board. This is 1 appointment, so will you take a motion?
I'll make the motion that Mary Lee Pekizer be reappointed to the term expiring December 31st, 2028 on the Traverse City Area District Library Board as recommended by the Ad Hoc Committee consisting of Mayor Amy Shamrow, Commissioner Heather Shaw, and Commissioner Mitch Treadwell.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Stanley and Shaw, and that is a appointment that we were able to do with our policy of incumbents who have good standing and no opposition. So any public comment on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And finally, we have the reestablishing the ad hoc committee for the Developing Brown Bridge Trust Fund ballot proposal. Glad to see that back. Would somebody like to make this motion? Anyone? This was a voluntary board, as I recall. Go ahead, Jackie.
I
Thank you.
recommend that a City Commission Ad Hoc Committee regarding Brown Bridge Trust Fund ballot proposal be appointed with a scope as outlined in the City Manager's November 14th, 2024 communication, and that Commissioners Tim Werner, Commissioner Heather Shaw, and Commissioner Mitchell Treadwell be reappointed to such committee with Commissioner Tim Werner to serve as chair.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson and Commissioner Shaw. And thank you to Commissioners Warner, Shaw, and Treadwell for volunteering for that one. Sometimes we are drawn, but this is going to do some work that's already been started. So we thank you all for continuing that so we can have it on the ballot next year. Any public comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. I think we're getting caught up. The clerk's office is now going to have a lot of fun scheduling all of us. So at this time, we'll open this floor up for any general public comment. So this can be on anything. It does not have to be on any of the agenda items for tonight. Does anybody have any general public comment? All right. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Any final comments from the commission? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Everyone who has sheets, please come up. Anyone up here can sign them for you. Actually, so can some of our staff off to the side. So pick your choice.
Good, how are you?